Om Agyantanamidam Dasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Nitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitamena Bhutare Sayam Rupagamayam Isvapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagarajatam Sagaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanatam Cha Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutare Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bracharani Nere Vishesha Sunyavari Prasatade Shatadani Panchakara Bistra Gripasinnu Vaivacha Titanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Om Mahavandayaya Krishna Prema Vradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauravishe Namaha Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahadida Vradai Pushpavantara Chitrashanda Tamanida He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 30. Tatopa Samritya Gira Sahasnair Vimukta Sangam Mana Adi Purushe Krishne Lasat Pitapate Chatur Bhuje Purastite Mirita Drigve Yad Vayat Tatopas Ritya Gira Sahasranir Vimukta Sangam Mana Adi Purushe Krishne Lasat Pitapate Chaturbhuje Purastite Mirita Trigvayat Harat Ayat Tato Pasamritya Gira Sahasrir Vimukta Sangam Mana Adi Purushe Krishne Lasat Pitapate Chaturbhuje Purastita Mirita Trigvayat. Anybody want to chant this verse?
Can you show screen with the verse? I think for those that might not have it. You know how to do that?
Anyone else?
Krishna Bala Nitai, can you show the screen with the verse?
Ooh.
You know how to do that? Share screen.
Yeah, I gotta get the verse up. I'm going traditional here. I got the book in front of me.
Oh, okay. Tada upasamritya gira saharasane vimukta sangamana adi purushe Krishne lasat pitapate chaturbhuje purastite milita vidyadharayat.
तदोपसंहृत्य गिरा सहस्रणीर् विमुक्तसङ्गं मन आदिपुरुषे कृष्णे सत्पीतपटे चतुर्भुजे पुरस्थिते मीलितदृग् विधारयत्
तदोपसामृत्य गिरा सहस्रैर्विमुक्तसङ्गमन आदिपुरुषे कृष्णे लसत्पितपते चतुर्भुजे पुरस्थिते मिलिता दृग्व्यधारयत्.
Anybody else on there? So Prabhu, just leave this up for now. Oh, Ravi? Want to chant this verse?
Yeah, sure, Prabhu. Tado pasamhritya gira sahasrainer vimukta sangam manadi purusho krishne lasat pita pate chaturbhuje purastite milita drug vyadharyayat.
Thank you. Word for word. Tada, at that time. Upasritya, withdrawing. Giraha, speech. Sahasranahe, Bhishmadev, who was expert in thousands of sciences and arts. Vimukta Sange, completely free from everything else. Manaha, mind. Adi Purushe, unto the original personality of Godhead. Krishna, unto Krishna. Lasat Pita Pate, decorated with yellow garments. Chatur Puje, unto the four-handed original Narayan. Puraha, just before. Stite, understanding. Amilita, widespread. Drik, vision. Vyadharayat, fixed. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace. Thereupon, the man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men, stopped speaking and being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him, four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. Purport. In the momentous hour of leaving his material body, Bhishmadev set the glorious example concerning the important function of the human form of life. A subject matter which attracts the dying man becomes the beginning of his next life. Therefore, if one is absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, he is sure to go back to Godhead without any doubt. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verses 5 through 15. And whoever at the time of death quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. That's 5, 6. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. 7. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time, carry out your prescribed duties of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. 8. He who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the past. He, O Partha, Arjuna is sure to reach me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and being transcendental, is beyond this material nature. 10. One who at the time of death fixes his life airs between the eyebrows, and in full devotion engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 11. Persons learned in the Vedas who utter Omkara and who are great sages in the renounced order enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. 12. The yogic situation is that of detachment from sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life hair on the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. 13. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating this sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. 14. For one who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to attain. O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Sri Bhishma Dev attained the perfection of quitting his body at will, and was fortunate enough to have Lord Krishna, the object of his attention, personally present at the time of death. He therefore fixed his wide open eyes upon him. He wanted to see Sri Krishna for a long time out of his spontaneous love for him, because he was a pure devotee. He had very little to do with the detailed performance of yogic principles. Simple bhakti is enough to bring about perfection. Therefore, the ardent desire of Bhishma Dev was to see the person of Lord Krishna, the most beloved object. And by the grace of the Lord, Sri Bhishma Dev had this opportunity, the last stage of his breath. Super glorious. Thereupon the man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men stopped speaking, and being completely free from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else, fixed his wide opened eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. One of the glories of Bhishma Dev, showing by his example of how to leave this body. So many thousands of devotees before him and after him have shown by their example the fixing the mind on the Supreme Lord. This is the theme I'm hearing in this verse. It's fixing the mind, the importance of fixing the mind, withdrawing the senses, fixing the mind on the Supreme Lord. So Bhishma Deva was given the benediction from what I remember, not an expert at the Mahabharata, but from what I remember from his father, that he could leave his body at will. Anytime he wanted, he could go. So if we think for a moment and put ourselves in the position of laying on a bed of arrows on a battlefield, how painful and intense that must be. Anybody stub their toe or break a bone ever? I fractured my heel last summer. I tell you, when I fractured it, I was not thinking of focusing my mind on Krishna. My mind was pretty much absorbed in the pain that I was feeling in my foot. Srila Prabhupada explains to us that when we leave our bodies, it's a very painful experience. So think of some painful experiences in your life. Were you able to fix your consciousness on Krishna at that time? If you said yes, bravo to you. Yay. If you said no, then we have some work to do. Either way, we have work to do. We can never stop, but still, it is a serious matter. Srila Prabhupada used to use the word urgency. We need to have urgency in our devotion, in our sadhana, should I say, in our sadhana, a sense of urgency, because as we know, death can come at any moment. We're experiencing some troubled and intense times with this coronavirus and so much contagious spreading, and the violence seemed to have stopped somewhat, or at least it hasn't been reported as much. But there's some, it's explained, this material world, there's danger at every step. So fixing the mind on the Lord is of utmost importance. So going through this purport a little bit, Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that this subject matter, the subject matter of the importance of the human form of life, subject matter which attracts a dying man, becomes the beginning of his next life. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining that whatever consciousness, whatever our mind is fixed on when we leave our body, that is what we attain in the next life. We're thinking of our, house, we may become a cockroach in our house. We're thinking of our wife or our husband or our kids, and we may become a wife or a husband in our next life. Not only that, but also the way we act, how we act, because how we act during this life molds our consciousness. So if we act like an animal, then our consciousness will be animalistic. If we act like a cultured human being, we may get some good benefit in our next life. If we think like a devotee, the servant of the Lord, then that reflects into our next life. And if we're fortunate, we will think of Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. Not necessarily, Prabhupada explains that back home, back to Godhead doesn't necessarily only mean that we go back to the spiritual world, but that our consciousness is fixed on the principles of the spiritual world, meaning that we are acting as the servant of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada is quoting, it's like 10 verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Let's go through them a little bit. And whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone at once, attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Very simply put, thinking of Krishna, when we leave the body, we attain a spiritual nature. He is declaring there is no doubt. Have no doubt. Think of Krishna and attain spiritual perfection. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. We were just speaking this. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duties of fighting. Fix your activity with your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me. You will attain me without doubt. This is the verse for the Grahasta. We have so many other duties we have to do in our lives. We have cooking and cleaning and attending family and working and maintaining various things in our lives. But the importance is fixing or is dedicating all of our activities to the Lord. Dedicating our money, dedicating our time, dedicating our consciousness. Now, does that mean that, we have to quit our jobs or this or that? But no, we do our jobs. We do our prescribed duty, as Krishna is explaining here, with the consciousness of pleasing Krishna, with our daily activities in absorption, dedicating it for the pleasure of the Lord. We must fix our intelligence so that we can control our mind, so they can withdraw the senses from the sense objects. There's the analogy of the chariot, the 5 horses pulling the chariot of the 5 senses. Charioteer is the mind, is the intelligence, the reins are the mind, chariot is the body, and the passenger is the soul. And when we're properly fixed, the intelligence is controlling the mind, just telling the senses what to do. But if the intelligence loses the reins, so to speak, and the reins are free to allow the horses, the senses, to run wild, then it is very precarious for the body and especially for the soul. So one must utilize their intelligence by fixing it on the instructions of the spiritual master, which is to, especially in this day and age, to chant the holy names, following the 4 regulative principles, engaging in the process, the other 9 processes of devotional service to our capacity, and to always remember Krishna and never forget him. Next verse Prabhupada is quoting here is, he who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. Meditating on the Supreme Lord, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me. It's a wonderful way of utilizing the mind. The mind is very unsteady, flickering. It wants to move from here to here. It's constantly. There's an exercise that you can do when you're chanting. I don't know if, at least when I'm chanting, the mind likes to wander around. One moment I'm thinking, I'm hearing the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The next moment, even though the tongue is vibrating the holy name, the mind is thinking what I have to do later today, or what happened yesterday or whatever else it may be. And there's an exercise one can do that can help understand some of the mind's nature. We did this in one class when I was in Mayapur. We the idea is understanding where these deviations of the mind come. So when you're chanting and when you recognize the mind has wandered, you stop for a moment and bring it back to the holy name, but take a moment to see what triggered that moment of distraction that the mind took to bring you to whatever it was you were thinking. I think the majority of the devotees who did this found that there was one small something, somebody moved, distracted you, and next thing you know, the mind was racing from here to there. But it really had nothing to do with what originally distracted you from hearing. So Krishna is saying here from this 8th verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 8, that we must constantly engage the mind. This is very, very difficult for the conditioned soul. I can only speak from my experience, but constantly engaging the mind and remembering Krishna it's a constant. I guess you could say it's a constant battle with the mind, because the mind wants to go, like I said, here and there. We can all experience it. Srila Prabhupada says one of the best ways of bringing the mind and remembering Krishna is chanting the holy name. When we read the pastimes of the Lord, then we have some nice stories, so to speak. We say pastimes because they're not just made up stories. They're the Leela of the Lord, the Lord's eternal activities. So many wonderful pastimes that we can engage our mind in remembering. So from Lord Chaitanya's beautiful, blissful kirtans to delivering Jagai Madhai to Krishna dancing with the gopis, or if you like, the chivalry of him fighting Kamsa, or any of the other demons that try to disturb the residents of Vrindavan, or his pastimes in Dwarka, with Krishna and Balaram herding the cows, arguing with the gopis, or Lord Ram fighting Ravana, building the bridge. So many endless, wonderful pastimes to engage our mind in. So we can utilize these gifts of the acharyas and of the Lord appearing age after age for our benefit. Text 9, one should meditate upon the Supreme Person, as the one who knows everything. He's the oldest, who is the controller, who is the smallest of the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conceptions, who is inconceivable, who is always a person. Luminous as the sun, can reveal everything, being transcendental, is beyond this material nature. This verse in itself is just a wonderful thing to meditate on. The Lord is always in control. Whatever happens, happens by his will, and that we can be grateful for. Everything in our lives is something we can learn, grow, become closer to the Lord, more grateful, more hopefully detached from this material world. He is the supreme controller. He is older than that. He is the oldest, yes. The wisest. He is Bhagavan. He has all 6 opulences. He is completely inconceivable. Sometimes we can't understand how or why something happens the way it happens, but everything happens by his will. And when we're surrendered to his will, everything happens for our benefit. We may not understand it at the moment, but we should always have faith that his will is for our supreme benefit, eternal benefit. Now we're getting into some of the Ashtanga Yoga practices. Maybe that's a little bit longer later. He who, at the time of death, fixes his life airs between the eyebrows, and in full devotion engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord, will certainly attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's again saying that when we fix ourselves, engaging in devotion, we attain the Supreme Lord. Reiterating in another way the earlier verses. The difficulty and the importance here is he's saying at the time of death, I'm noticing this at the time of death, that what we're doing throughout our lives will very much influence what we will be thinking at the time of death. If we're engaged in sense gratification our whole lives, the chances of us remembering Krishna at the time of death is not very high. By his causeless mercy, if we've pleased him sometime throughout our lives, if we've pleased the spiritual master, then if we may fall away from our sadhana and engage in some unfavorable activities, by his causeless mercy, we may get that mercy. But Srila Prabhupada explains the importance of us constantly having vigilance in remembering the Lord, because at the time of death, what we practice now will help. Persons learned in the Vedas who utters Omkara and who are great sages in the renounced order enter into Brahman. Srila Prabhupada explains some places that if we chant the holy name, we can attain. We are constantly chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Even a householder can get the benefit of those in the renounced order. So desiring this here, Krishna's mentioning the renounced order. So we can get some benefit if we're constantly chanting. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy, the 4 regulative principles, one of the 4 regulative principles. I shall now explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. So now we get into some of this yogic and Ashtanga type practices of the yogic situation is that of detachment from sensual engagements. This is coming back to using our intelligence to control the mind, to control the senses. We closing all doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life hair on the top of the head. Here Krishna's changing it up. Anybody notice where he changes it up? You know what I mean by that? says fix the live hair on the top of the head. Where did he say to fix the live hair earlier? Without looking. Anybody?
Eyebrows.
Yeah, the eyebrows. Fixing in the eyebrows. And now he's saying on the top of the head. Fixing the mind and the heart and the life hair on top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. I'm not so learned in this these practices to know why in one place Krishna is saying one, and in the other he's saying one place he's saying fix between the eyes, and one place he's saying on top of the head. The only thing that's coming to mind right now is that in this verse 10 he's saying at the time of death, and here he's speaking about closing the doors, engaging in controlling the senses and fixing the mind, not necessarily at the time of death, but as a practice, a sadhana. Two different chakras, one on top of the head, one on the third eye between the eyebrows. But later Srila Prabhupada explains that simple bhakti is enough. We don't need to necessarily become Ashtanga yoga experts, but we must become fixed in the process of devotional service to the Lord. One who remembers me without deviation. Or did I skip one? After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, or in other places, I think Srila Prabhupada in these purports talk about chanting Hare Krishna also. The supreme combination of letters. One thinks of the Supreme Lord and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. One who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain. Without deviation, I am easy to obtain. Because of his constant engagement in devotional service. Devotional service attracts the mercy of the Lord. It is explained that when one engages and pleases Krishna with his devotion, you actually purchase Krishna. When the gopis of Vrindavan were it pleased Krishna so much, he said that he could not repay their debts. So when we're engaged in such pure devotion, where our own desire is no longer the object of our attention, but wanting to please Krishna, we actually what does it say? By such devotion, one can control Krishna, something like that. It's something quite amazing to think about, but the Supreme Lord becomes completely the relationship becomes so sweet, deep, and connected that, yeah, Krishna actually desires to please his devotee, to do whatever his devotee wants. It's what's it say here? Inconceivable. It is inconceivable. It's beyond my realizations. But repeating what I've heard from the previous acharyas. One who remembers me without deviation, I'm easy to obtain. It's explained that the whole material existence becomes the size of the ocean of material existence becomes the size of water that one can keep in the hoofprint of a calf. Very easy to cross. Very Krishna makes it so easy. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion, after returning to this material, never return to this material world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. After attaining me, great souls or yogis in devotion never return to this material world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Great benediction, great yogis of devotion, bhakti yogas, engaging in bhakti yoga. Lord Chaitanya gave us the easiest and greatest of all ways to engage, chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Utilizing our tongue, we're chanting on our beads, we're utilizing our hands by associating with Tulsi. We're using our ears to hear of Krishna, and our mind in focusing on that hearing. And when we're fortunate, the mind will, Krishna's pastimes will be revealed within the heart, which reflects in the mind, but that is revealed by great mercy, pleasing the spiritual master, which pleases Krishna, who reveals such pastimes. Bhishmadev attained to the perfection of quitting his body at will, and is fortunate enough to have Krishna, the object of his attention, personally present with him at the time of death. What a great benefit Bhishmadev gets. He has pleased the Lord by his devotion, that Krishna is eager to be there with him when he is quitting his body. This is the nature of Krishna, that whatever we do for him, he wants to do 10,000 times more, because his nature is so merciful, and he is so grateful for whatever we do for him. This is something we can practice, our gratefulness for the spiritual master, our gratefulness for the association of the devotees, our gratefulness of the opportunity to chant Hare Krishna, to engage in the process of the whole of bhakti. What qualification do we have? Absolutely none. This should be our consciousness, that we have absolutely no qualification, that the mercy of the spiritual master is all that we have. When we read the prayers of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we read the prayers of Narottam Das Thakur, the surrender to the spiritual master, how grateful they are, how much they're relying on their mercy. It's a great example. He therefore fixed his wide open. Therefore he fixed his open eyes. Well, reading that wrong. He therefore fixed his open eyes upon him, upon Krishna. He wanted to see Krishna for a long time, out of his spontaneous love for him. And we developed this spontaneous mood of wanting to see Krishna, of wanting to serve Krishna. This is very good. Because he was a pure devotee, he had very little to do with the detailed performance of yogic principles. We don't hear so much of the acharyas talking about these yogic type principles, but just basically engaging our minds on Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains that when we're engaging in devotional service, that is fixing our mind. We're trying to please Krishna. It's easier when we're like, if we're, cooking for the Lord, or, on the altar, doing some seva for the deities directly, or if we're at our home serving the deities, or we're chanting the holy name. It becomes a little more difficult when we're going to work and we don't necessarily identify that activity as devotional service. It's like, okay, I got to go to work now. I got to do this or that, whatever it is that we do. I don't know what everyone on this call does for work, only some of you, but it doesn't necessarily matter. A lot of the times we have this mentality or this idea that we have our material life, aka our work, caring for our family or whatever, but we have some other maybe recreational type activities, but all of this, when we surrender to Krishna, we no longer have a material and spiritual life. Anything that we're doing that's so-called material is an opportunity for us to learn how to dovetail all of our activities for the pleasure of the Lord. Of course, there's the activities of the four regulative principles: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, what's the other one? No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. These four cannot be used in the service of the Lord. So these activities, Srila Prabhupada says, are forbidden activities. But we have an opportunity every moment to dovetail our consciousness with Krishna. And all of these different tools Krishna is explaining in these verses, Prabhupada is giving in his purports, or devotees that we have the opportunity to associate with and see their example, how they're engaging every moment in the service of the Lord, helps us to also find that balance, find that that consciousness. And the more that we engage in the process, the more that we try and surrender, the more opportunities Krishna gives us, and the more becomes easy. Like it's explained that the first time one does like something naughty, some illegal activity, someone steals something, not encouraging stealing, but people do it. And when someone does it the first time, they're super nervous, this, that, or the other thing, and worried about getting caught, worried about doing this, so this is not good, but I need this, that, or I want this, and they do it. And the more they do it, the more the easier it becomes. And if it is done regularly and often enough, becomes a part of their nature. So when we engage in the process, we fix the mind on Krishna, hearing, chanting, remembering, serving. Eventually, it becomes second nature, it becomes our nature. And as one great poet said, I forget who his name was, when sensual activities come into the mind, I spit at that thought. So this is where we want to be. We want to come to a point where anything that is not in relation to Krishna, we spit at that thought. This is all obtained by the process that Srila Prabhupada gave us, associating with the devotees, reading and hearing about Krishna's pastimes and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and ultimately our constant chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by the mercy of the Lord, the spiritual master, and the devotees, we will fix our consciousness on the Lord, and at the time of death, we will attain that spiritual existence, that spiritual place. And while being in the material world, have the consciousness of being back home, back to Godhead. Is there any questions or any comments? Anything that stood out to anyone in this verse they'd like to share? Or I am requesting each and every one to share something, at least one thing. Can everyone hear?
Yeah.
Have I lost everyone?
Yeah. Prabhuji, I think it's very nice lecture. Thank you for giving it. I've been slightly on and off during the session because I was occupied with something else. But what kind of struck me was this, what you just mentioned like a few minutes ago, that there is nothing, there are no two different things, material and spiritual. It all becomes one once you are part of this consciousness. So I actually didn't look at it that way. Yeah, thank you for giving the thought. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's important to also remember that, just because we're engaged, it's important to engage the consciousness and engage the intention in pleasing Krishna. Just because we're chanting Hare Krishna, but we're engaging in our jobs, if our consciousness is focused on making money or making a big name for ourselves, doesn't necessarily mean that it's it's not pleasing to Krishna necessarily. We have to be careful to check our intentions in that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like two. It should not be two separate things. We should be engaging all of our activities in remembering and pleasing Krishna. Just wanted to be clear on that it's not that it's not automatic. There's effort that needs to be put in, but our consciousness should not be that I have this part of my life and I have this part of my life, my spiritual and material lives, and I have two separate things that are going on. It's not that. That is not what Krishna is explaining in Bhagavad Gita. But we're dovetailing both of our activities. Like he's saying here, carry out your duty of fighting, Arjuna, but at the same time, dedicate your activities to me. And your mind and intelligence fixed on me. That is the importance. That is the part of bringing our so-called material life into our spiritual life. I say so-called because when we are doing what Krishna is explaining here, is all for all for the benefit of our spiritual life. Anyway, please, somebody else carry on. I wanted to clarify that point. Hare Krishna. Jai Gauranga.
Can you repeat Ravi Prabhu's comment? Because of background noise, I didn't hear it.
Oh, Ravi Prabhu was saying the point of having. Maybe he can say it probably better than me. Prabhu, why don't you say again so everyone can hear you?
Yeah, sure. What I was trying to say, Prabhuji, is that Prabhuji just mentioned a while ago that once you start walking this path, there are no two different things. It's the spiritual and material, it's the same. So I didn't actually look at it that way. I was trying to compartmentalize that. Look, part of my day is like spiritual, part of my day is material. So I think this gave me a good clarity. I mean that no, look, it actually is one, as long as you have that consciousness with you all the time, and you dedicate your activities to Krishna. Yeah.
Thank you.
More comments, please. More, like someone to at least share one thing, even if it's 2 words.
So I'll share 2 things. One, thank you for this is a very glorious verse. And I like how you contrasted in the, Srila Prabhupada's listing. It's very interesting how Srila Prabhupada just lists all 10 verses from 5 to 15 of chapter 8. And I appreciated how you contrasted the Ashtanga yoga aspect or the yogic principles versus the pure devotional activities of trying to remember Krishna by the processes. It's interesting how Srila Prabhupada says, simple bhakti is enough to bring about perfection. So that's, I think, as versus the Ashtanga yoga process, which is interesting, but a challenging process for most of us. So thank you for comparing and contrasting the 2 processes. That was good. That was helpful. Something interesting and something that you said, something one can add is you were looking for somebody to add something. When I read this verse, I thought it was interesting how Lord Shri Krishna was standing there with all the Pandavas, Krishna and Kurukshetra, and yet Bhishma Dev is seeing Krishna in Chaturbhuja form. The verse says that, who stood before him four-handed. And I thought that was really wonderful because we know from Mahabharata that was the form of Lord Krishna that was particularly attractive to Bhishma Dev. So I thought that was a wonderful example of how Krishna carries all potencies within him, including the four-armed form within his Sham Sundar form. So anyways, that was something I found interesting and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu, for bringing that point up. I also thought that same thing, not exactly the same way you said it, but I also noticed that that point, and I did not know that was the form of the Lord that Bhishma Dev had been attracted to. So I thank you for sharing that. That's nice. And I also like this point that you said simple bhakti is enough to bring about perfection. That, yeah, he's quoting all these things, but at the same time he's saying you don't need to know all of this Ashtanga yoga. Simply engage in the process of bhakti, and that will be enough to bring about perfection. Very nice.
Yeah, I think it's from Baladev Vidyabhushan's Shri Baladev Vidyabhushan's commentary on. You notice a transition when you read these series of verses, like you pointed out nicely, where it goes from Ashtanga yoga aspects of things to bhakti, and Baladev Vidyabhushan points out in commentary to 14, like Srila Prabhupada does, that one goes from kind of like one's own strength to Krishna being the deliverer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where that's coming from. Something I read by Baladev Vidyabhushan when he talks about these kind of concepts is, he says, I'm paraphrasing, like, how can somebody who's looking for something that's lost on the eastern side head towards the western side. Meaning, if our mind is absorbed in objects of the senses, then how can we achieve that which is on the other side of the horizon? So, I guess the point is that at some point in our life, we have to decide where our attention is going to be turned towards. Is it going to be towards the material, objects of our attention, or towards Krishna? And then once we make that decision, make a serious endeavor. I'm not speaking from personal experience. I'm speaking from, the commentary of Bala Nitai. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
But Prabhuji, the question I have about your comment is, if we, going back to my understanding from this, if we overlap them together, both material and spiritual, so there is nothing that we need to choose, right? I mean, everything that we are doing is from with the consciousness. Then why do we need to choose between these two? I'm not sure whether I got your comment right. Sorry if I didn't.
Yeah. Bala Nitai, do you want to answer that?
The important part here is that is our consciousness is what makes things spiritual and material. When we use things for the enjoyment of the senses, they become material. Srila Prabhupada would say, we have these microphones, and we're using these microphones so that we can speak about Krishna. So they are spiritual. But other people are using this microphone to glorify themselves or the material world for sense enjoyment. That means they're material. So when our consciousness is fixed on seeing Krishna everywhere, seeing everything in relation to Krishna, then there's no longer material or spiritual. It's all spiritual. It's the consciousness in which we are utilizing such things or engaging in such activities. Like it's explained that there's a worker who's doing one thing and another worker doing the exact same thing. One is fixed on pleasing Krishna, one is fixed on the paycheck and going out drinking that night. One is engaging in spiritual activity, one is engaging in material activity, simply because of their consciousness. So I don't know what you do. Maybe say software. Do you work in software?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so you're working in software and your colleagues are working in software on the same project. Your goal is, I will maintain my family, I will maintain the temple, I will engage in the process of devotional service, I will, of course you need some of your money to maintain your family, but you use some of it to, sponsor feasts and, help with the temple activities, and you're engaging your mind in thinking of Krishna. And your colleagues are, absorbed in whatever it is they're absorbed in, this or that, that has nothing to do with Krishna. This is the deciding factor of what makes one activity spiritual, one material. So when we speak about surrendering to Krishna, we're speaking about, our spiritual life. And when we utilize our activities that are so-called material for the benefit, for the pleasure of Krishna, for the betterment of the movement, that is a spiritual activity, even though it appears material. Does that make sense? Does that clarify what you're...
Yeah, it does clarify. My comment was for Jay Prabhuji's saying, who said when at one point in time in our life we had to decide between spiritual and material. I was just trying to say that, look, if your consciousness is same, it's not that we need to decide something one way or the other. It's all becomes one, which is spiritual.
Yes, and that is pure devotion, right? But are we at that place? We've all come in contact by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the devotees, this process of bhakti. But have we surrendered our day to day, our moment to moment, our, full mind, body, and soul in the process of devotional service? Have we done that? That is something that we have to, check. Are we able to surrender more, or is or is there some parts of our, consciousness still wanting to extract some enjoyment? More than likely, we could all sit for this moment and think of at least one thing that we're still attached to within this material world that we want to enjoy separately from Krishna. If not one, probably many. I know I could think of many, right? So it's easy to say, yeah, surrender 100% to Krishna, but it's hard to do. It's a simple process, but it takes time, it takes effort, it takes constant focus to keep our consciousness there. So that's the way that I'm understanding what Jai Prabhu is saying, Jai Shastinanand Prabhu, and what Baladev Vijayabhushan is commenting on. Like, we can't go to the east or to the west if we want to find something in the east. So we have to, it's constant. So that's like here, all of these verses are speaking about constantly engaging and fixing the mind on the Lord, withdrawing the senses, fix the mind, fix the life airs, engage in full devotion, remember me. I mean, these are the constant words, with your mind and intelligence fixed on me. I mean, when you look at these verses, it's like the constant theme, right? So, and what is Srila Prabhupada telling us? He's telling us to engage in the process of devotional service 24 hours a day. Why? Because that fixes our consciousness on Krishna. So when we're doing our work, Arjuna is saying, Arjuna's prescribed duty is to fight. He's a warrior. He's there to protect people. He doesn't want to fight. But Krishna is saying, you need to fight. This is what you got to do. I don't want to go to work. If any of us don't go to work, then we're not going to have food for our family. We're not going to. So we can't just give up work, right? Unless we're like Srivas Thakur, who, was completely absorbed. We're not completely absorbed. So we need to do these practical things. And while we're doing these practical things, as Krishna says in the 7th verse here, at the same time, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duties of fighting. For him, it's fighting. For us, or for you, Prabhu, it's the software. For Jai Satchidananda Prabhu, it's his patience. For me, it's in the electrical field, right? So we all have these different prescribed duties that we're doing. And when we do them, fixed in Krishna, fixed in carrying out these things, always thinking of him and for his pleasure, that becomes pure devotional service. Yukta Vairagya, engaging material activities in the service of Krishna. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Prabhuji. Yeah. I think this adds a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's hard. You're always having to do it. I mean, it took me years and years and years to even understand the concept. And it's going to take me years and years and years to actually do it, more than likely. But the idea is like that is what Krishna is explaining from my understanding and from what I've heard from senior devotees.
I think Ravi Prabhu, Bala Nitai Prabhu quoted the relevant verse from chapter 8, which is verse 7, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mam Anusmaram Yudhya Cha Maya Prito Manobhatir. That verse. What I was mentioning is that idea of the eastern western side. Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu is speaking from Upanishad, which says that Lord Vishnu is far away for somebody whose mind is absorbed in sense enjoyment. So whereas you're talking about doing one's material occupation, etc., or material activities, which Bala Prabhu correctly, in my opinion, referenced 8.7. Because if you look at 8.7, it says, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu, that you should all Mam Anusmaram Yudhya Cha. Remember me and fight. He didn't say Yudhya Mam Anusmaram Cha. He's not saying fight and then remember me. Whereas earlier in the Gita, as you know, in the Karma Yoga section is like, do your work and then offer your results to me. So that means that offering comes after I do the activity. Whereas here he's saying, no, that you consciously remember me and then do your activity. So yes, material activity, like Bhagavatam was saying, can be done in that way, where you're remembering Krishna. You may not have direct connection that how does this line of code, translate into remembrance of Krishna and pleasing Krishna. But one can at least say, my dear Lord Krishna, thank you for the ability. Thank you for the intelligence where I can do this. All ability descends, Krishna says, I'm the intelligence of the intelligent. So I think verse 8.7 you'll find very meaningful as you go back to it and contrast it to, what's in like end of chapter 3, like where Krishna says, do your work and then offer it to me. And at that point in the Bhagavad Gita, Kirtan, Krishna doesn't even really reference who he is, whereas here in 8, Krishna is coming to that point of who I am, as he expands in chapter 9. So yes, you can do your material activity and still be, engaged in devotional service.
Got it. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Nartam Vas Prabhu, some comment. Punam and Nilam Prabhis.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The point that I actually really like is when you share your experiences, your stay at Mayapur, and I always look for ways to improve my japa, and just it's really hard to, like, of course, like our mind wanders, like you said. I really like that point, like the pause and bring your mind back. But oftentimes what I'm trying to do is finish my japa, which is, I have chores to do, go to work, but yes, I will try to implement that in my japa next time.
It's a nice technique.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, should we go ahead and end this session?
I guess it's late. I was hoping that other devotees would say, but that's fine. Yeah, we're past time, so.
And there might be devotees looking through YouTube, which unfortunately cannot interface.
I can't see them. I don't know who's.
Yeah. So
glories to them for coming, and Jai Shri Sachinandan Gauda Hari Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Srimad
Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.